Welcome to this edition of our Committee on the Present Danger China webinar series, a weekly feature of a group committed to raising the alarm about the threat we face from the Chinese Communist Party and the unrestricted warfare that it has been waging against us for decades with very considerable effect, alas, but unbeknownst to too many Americans. This particular program has taken on a new urgency in the wake of the murder last week of Charlie Kirk, a patriot, man of uncommon clarity about the dangers our country faces and the importance of preserving that country in the face of these various threats, including from the Chinese Communist Party. With Charlie's removal from the scene, we now are being told that political violence is likely to intensify, that there may well be considerably worse to come. And the question that we wanted to address is not simply whether that might redound to the benefit of Xi Jinping, the dictator of communist China, at least for the moment, but actually be something that he has prepared to put in motion, to perhaps instigate, certainly to be able to capitalize on massively. And we're going to discuss the ways in which that could be done, the implications should that occur, most immediately for the United States, but also for those who will be looking to us to come to their assistance in the event China accompanies such aggressive behavior inside the United States with aggressive behavior at far remove in the Western Pacific, most obviously, but perhaps elsewhere as well. We have assembled, as we try to each week, an extraordinary panel of experts, deeply knowledgeable about various aspects of this particular angle of attack of this unrestricted warfare agenda. And I'm delighted to be able to say that the cumulative effect of, I think, the assessments, the analyses, the warnings they will deliver are the sort of thing that should both raise considerably the level of situational awareness of, our representatives in government, including our military, those responsible for homeland security, but also, I hope, the American people more generally, because their assistance, as we will talk about in the course of this program, could be of incalculable importance to an outcome that is consistent with our vital national and homeland security interests, and indeed the survival of our nation and its people. We're going to hear first from Trevor Loudon, a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China, a man who has contributed frequently to these programs, for which I will be eternally grateful. He is, in addition to all of that, an accomplished author, notably of books addressing the issue of the enemy within, the title of his first, also, I think, his first film. He is also the author of two books of particular relevance to today's topic, and that is multi-volume sets addressing the penetration of our Senate and House of Representatives by the Chinese communists and their friends. That would be, in the first case, Senate security risk senators and House un-Americans in the second instance. I commend these various books and his essays, his podcasts, his commentaries, and of course, his contributions to programs like our Securing America to you with the greatest of enthusiasm. Trevor Loudon, it is very, very great to have you back with us, sir, and to set the stage for this conversation by talking a bit about how the Chinese Communist Party has augmented rather dramatically of late our enemies within. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, what the situation is this: we've had a major gathering, an influx of Chinese military-age young men over the last 3 or 4 years under the Biden's administration's open borders policy. And I believe these people are now working on marijuana farms and security jobs. They are working all around the country. Also, we have reports, reliable reports from security people of Uzbeks, Pakistanis, various other Turks, various other nationalities um, coming into places like Los Angeles, getting set up jobs and rideshare, acting out neighborhoods, getting ready for the big signal. We have for a long time now, we've had Hezbollah, Russians, Chechens, Hamas, Cubans, Venezuelans, all sorts of hostile foreign nationalities infiltrating the border. Some estimates put the Chinese military age young men, many suspected to be Chinese special forces, in the well over 100,000 mark, more than enough to cause total mayhem in the lead up to a major war in the Pacific or elsewhere. So on the ground here in the domestic front, we have obviously seen the recent killings in Minnesota. We've seen the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And in every case, you see, there's two aspects of this. We see a major upsurge since October 7th of the so-called red-green axis on our college campuses, an alliance of groups, Muslim Brotherhood and CARE-affiliated groups like Palestinian Youth Movement, Students for Justice in Palestine, and others working on our campuses with Democratic Socialists of America, Communist Party USA, Workers' World Party, Party for Socialism and Liberation, etc. Now, all of these groups are affiliated in some way to Communist China. The Islamic groups are often affiliated to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which has deep links to the Chinese, or Hamas, which also has deep links to China. So you've got multiple strands, both of foreign infiltrators and domestic agitators who take their cues from Communist China. Now, two of the most dangerous of these groups are the Freedom Road Socialist Organization and the Liberation Road. They both used to be the same group, but split about 15 years ago. One was more oriented towards the Democratic Party, infiltrating mainstream politics. The other was much more orientated towards street-level violence. Both are affiliated to China. The Freedom Road Socialist Organization is also very deeply affiliated to Venezuela and has sent at least 5 delegations to Venezuela in the last 2 years, regularly hosts Venezuelan diplomats and their events in America. They're deeply tied to the Maduro regime. The other one, Liberation Road, is directly connected to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, and they set up the Black Lives Matter group. Black Lives Matter is a Chinese operation. The Freedom Road Socialist Organization, they organized with Liberation Road, organized much of the George Floyd rioting. There were 3 attempts to induce rioting in that year, 2020. They tried to start the rioting when a so-called jogger was killed in Atlanta, but that didn't quite work. They tried to start it again when Breonna Taylor, a young black woman, was killed in Louisville, Kentucky, in a police raid. That didn't quite work. George Floyd was attempt number 3. It was all ready to go. And it only worked in George Floyd case because the killing was so public and could easily be spun. And it was in the headquarters of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I have on tape the leader of Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Jess Sundin, openly talking about the rioting, the looting, the arson, and the anarchy as being an integral part of their movement. And her partner, another leader of Freedom Road Socialist Organization, made a speech the day that Trump was inaugurated in 2017, January 20th, 2017, calling for the destruction of the Trump administration by making America ungovernable. So these people, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, tried to start the riots in Los Angeles recently. That was completely their project. They had groups in Minneapolis, Chicago, and other centers tailing ICE agents, following ICE agents around, trying to provoke them into violence. It didn't work in Chicago. It didn't work in Minneapolis. It worked. They got their little spark in Los Angeles. Then the rioting went full bore, and I think it was only because President Trump ordered the National Guard into Southern California and really put the fire out before it could get really going that we were saved several months of rioting across the country. The other thing I'd like to add is the Russian influence. The Chinese are working with the Muslims a lot. They work with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the pro-China groups, the Freedom Road, Party for Socialism, Liberation, and Communist Party USA. They work very openly with CARE, the Students for Justice in Palestine, all of those groups, and they are pushing the anti-Semitism from the left and the violence from the left. On the right, the Russians target the right. When we saw the so-called Charlottesville disaster in 2017, that was done by pro-Russian rightists like Richard Spencer, David Duke of the former Klansman. The so-called alt-right is a Russian adventure. That's a Russian project. And we're seeing massive Russian infiltration pushing the Civil War meme in many conservative groups around the country. The Russians target the right. They do it through the pro-Alexander Dugin groups. Their message is amplified by people like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon to some degree, hopefully inadvertently. But the Russians are working amongst the conservative groups, pushing the narrative that only a civil war or a national divorce, which is a meme picked up by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who can't keep away from Russian propaganda. She is pushing the idea that the blue states, the red states, should separate from the blue states. Well, and it is easy to figure out who would benefit from a national divorce in this country or a civil war in this country. Alexander Dugin, Putin's brain, who is admired by many on the alt-right, the fascist right, the racist right in this country, has openly called for the exacerbation of political and racial tensions within America to bring about a civil war. So what we've got is the Russians pushing the right. We've got to destroy the left. We've got to have a civil war. We've got to have a national divorce. We've got to finish this off. Meanwhile, the left are getting more and more violent, more and more intense. They have networks of John Brown gun clubs all over the states, and they've got, armed queers in Utah. They've got all these armed groups. Antifa has undergone a lot of military training. So you've got an increasingly armed and militant left, goaded by the Chinese, and an increasingly armed and militant faux right. These are not constitutional people. These are people that came out of the alt-right. These are people that tend to be pro-Russia, very anti-Israel, very anti-Ukraine, a lot of them. These are the people pushing the revolution from the right. So we have got a recipe for disaster looming, and it's going to take some very strong local grassroots action and some very strong commitment by our national security forces to keep these people apart and investigate them. Shut down the Russian connections to the Duginites, shut down the Chinese and Islamic connections to the other side of the left wing of this political spectrum. But either way, we've got two major hostile powers, each picking a faction in America, driving us to civil war. to national divorce, to violence, to political assassinations. Myself and others, I know Jeff said this, we've been expecting political assassinations in America for some time now. The Muslims, the radical Islamic groups are openly talking about this and openly talking about sacrificing and jihad and how many of us aren't going to be here later on this year. So I think we're getting very close to a major outbreak of violence in this country, and I certainly hope I'm wrong, but that's what I see, driven mainly by Iran, Russia, and China.
Trevor, thank you so much. I apologize for technical difficulties at my end and the confusion that arose there, but we're looking forward to Jeff Nyquist, who I was introducing earlier as a brilliant strategic analyst as well as author. He has been active as a member of our Committee on the Present Danger of China, contributing, I should say, to these programs on many occasions. And we're particularly anxious to get his thoughts about how what Trevor has just shared with us fits into a larger strategic purpose that is actually of long standing between the Chinese and their Russian no-limits partners of today. Jeff, welcome back. It's good to have you. The floor is yours, sir.
It's very important to understand that in discussing a civil war scenario in the United States, the active measures of China and Russia and the infiltration of the United States by China economically and militarily, actually, as Trevor pointed out, is a fundamental reality in any kind of civil war equation. Russia and China have a long history of theorizing about how to get into America, how to destroy the United States, because it was their principal enemy. And it's very interesting. There's Igor Panarin, who teaches at the High Diplomatic School in Moscow, is a KGB colonel, who was actually assigned to study this subject at the last year of the Soviet Union, back in 1991. Panarin has surfaced a few times, even in Western media, talking about how the United States would enter a civil war at some point, that the forces are arrayed against each other will inevitably produce a civil war. And in his scenario, America is then divided by foreign powers into zones. And he's even produced maps showing this. Now, long before Igor Panarin talked about it, I should point out that Konstantin Kutushev, who was a key member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party Soviet Union, would go around to the Eastern Bloc countries, and we know he went to Czechoslovakia in 1967 and actually lecture on this subject. And I got a quote from Konstantin Kutushev. Kutushev said that America is a volatile society that can be driven to either extreme. And he pointed to the Kennedy assassination and the protest of the Vietnam War that was going on at the time. And he said, look, if we can impose certain things on the United States, economic limitations, active measures, we can reproduce this. We could produce this in the future. But more recently, Chinese dissident Mr. Wang of Luda Media has claimed that China, as the PLA, has been tasked to infiltrate the United States with 250,000 PLA troops. But he mentioned in particular a unit of the PLA, a commando unit, which was tasked with assassinations and with provocation, creating incidents that would appear to be violence of Americans on Americans to move the country closer to civil war in the midst of this infiltration invasion process. And last year, according to Mr. Wang, this unit was successfully deployed into the United States before the actual election, but it did nothing during the election, although we did see President Trump during the election campaign, well, last July, being shot in the ear. We see this rising violence in American society, like in the 1960s. In the 60s, of course, we had the assassinations of JFK and RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. There was a lot of violence and rioting in the 1960s. We've seen that in the last few years. Similar conditions being fostered, like mentioned the George Floyd rioting, And the communists, they're always ready to go into action. Their organizations, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, they're ready to go into action when these things occur. Now, there's an analysis they have of American society, and I should go through it. You have the left and the right, and I might characterize, it was once joked that America has only two parties, the evil party and the stupid party. And of course, the evil party is the far left with its violent groupings and its infiltration of society and its toxic messages. And of course, the party of administrative tyranny, the rise of state Leviathan institutions that are taking our freedoms away step by step. The stupid party, I guess you could say the first example is the White Army in the Russian Civil War. You have the conservative movement, which was called the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party, the alt-right. And of course, what we really have today is a strange kind of confusion where you have themes coming about on the right that used to only be on the left. And you have themes on the left that only came about on the right. And I believe this is part of an active measures process. At the same time, you are increasing the contradictions, you are increasing the sense of violence and irreconcilable differences. So that the stupid party is becoming more evil as the evil party is becoming stupid. And this is the effect, I think, of an outside influence. We don't see leaders. What's interesting about the assassination of Charlie Kirk is that his high intelligence, his ability to debate, and his civic sense of engaging with people on the left directly. You can see how killing a person like this who could bridge the gap and is humanized by his willingness to appear in front of college students who are being indoctrinated, not only in colleges, by the way, and also in high schools. This humanizing of the right and this engagement of right and left is so important for debate and for the country to come together. And killing him seems to me very important from the point of view of Russian and Chinese strategy. I'm not saying they had anything to do with it, but you will see immediately people like Alexander Dugin stepping forward in his Substack saying, MAGA must now have a civil war in America, and MAGA must unite with Russia for a world civil war. Okay. And then you see people like Alex Jones, who has, promoted Russian memes. His co-host, Owen Schroyer, has publicly said that Russia and China are the good guys, America's the bad guys, and that we need to unite with Russia and China. Very interesting. You suddenly have Alex Jones saying, it's war, it's war, it's war, like, bring it on. And you've got a number of these people on the right, saying, bring it on. And I think that like Trevor said, Russian active measures, but also Chinese, they've divided the sides of the street. The Russians on the right side of the street, the Chinese pulling on the left to bring this about. And I find it is very dangerous. We mustn't have a civil war, but this may be inevitable if you have people going crazy. You have mass formation going on. You have distrust of the government. You have conspiracy theories running wild. And you have the intellectual content of the right has sunk. The left has always, claimed intellectuality, but it's a fabrication. It's a misunderstanding. It's nonsense. And so what you have is nonsense, low-grade nonsense on both sides, driving people to hysteria. And once you get that, it's like Ortega y Gasset wrote before the Spanish Civil War. You get rising violence, you get the mob, and you get a civil war in its slovenliness, intellectual slovenliness, and moral idiocy. And there's no doubt this is on the rise here. And it's being exploited by these foreign powers.
This is extremely helpful in terms of providing a bit more context to the plan and its origins. I want to go next to Gordon Chang, who is joining us by video. Gordon and I spoke earlier in the day on our program, Securing America, about how the Chinese in particular are viewing and the kinds of steps that they have taken to prepare for exploiting, as I said, at the minimum, perhaps as well, initiating the Civil War 2.0. Gordon G. Chang is a very, very esteemed contributor to much of what we do here at the Committee on the Present Danger of China. We're very grateful to him for joining us by videotape today. Let's go to the video now.
In the beginning of the Biden years, when they had opened up the border, the Chinese migrants that we saw were primarily family groups. In other words, people who wanted to live in a free society. But in the last year or so, U.S. Border Patrol noticed a marked change in the composition of the Chinese migrants. And they reported that 2/3 of the migrants from China in that last year were single males, military age, traveling without family members, some of them pretending not to speak English, coming into the U.S. in packs of 4 to 15. And in some of those packs, Border Patrol noticed that everybody was fitted out in identical kit. Border Patrol knew that some of them had links to the Chinese military. So this was an extremely dangerous situation, especially because the Biden administration didn't track migrants where they went. And I suspect a lot of them disappeared into American society. One more fact, and that is in February of last year, Border Patrol apprehended 3 Chinese migrants trying to sneak into Maine under cover of darkness. What made this particularly ominous was that there was a 4th Chinese migrant had come into the U.S. earlier, who was there obviously by prearrangement, helping them to get in. And that means if you're a migrant and you wanted to come into the U.S. because it was a free society, at the Biden time, you would give yourself up to Border Patrol so that you could get in the asylum line and get benefits from generous localities. So if you're coming in trying to evade detection, it meant you were coming here for no good.
Yeah. And Gordon, those are the kind of people that we really don't have any fix on at all. I hear estimates that range from everything to 10,000 to 125,000, I think, with the largest numbers of those who actually checked in with Border Patrol during that last year or so. Then there are the gotaways, or folks like the ones you're talking about in Maine who tried to be gotaways, that's for sure. And the prospect that you could have anything remotely like those numbers, and people, in addition, that presumably have very good reason not to want to be checked out or in any way subjected to scrutiny, means that quite possibly there is a multi-division strength cohort inside the United States of trained military professionals. But I just would invite you to describe a little bit about what could possibly go wrong.
Well, they could be attacking our grid, starting wildfires, poisoning reservoirs, bombing shopping centers. The list goes on of things that they could do to take down our country in the first time of war. Matter of fact, if there's a war over there, Frank, I think it starts over here.
Political violence is seemingly an increasing threat. We're seeing people who are actively speaking about, on frankly both sides, war coming, maybe even civil war. And I wanted to talk to you about how the Chinese Communist Party might play into such a scenario and benefit from it.
There's so many different ways that it could. And the first one would be propaganda, which it has been very effective. They've been interfering in our elections, and we can track this. They were very active in the presidential election in 2020. They were very active in state and local elections in 2024. We know whose candidates that they were supporting. They were bringing in a lot of money surreptitiously through, for instance, Act Blue, the Democratic Party website. So there were all sorts of things that it was involved in. But the most important one is they have a core of soldiers here, operatives. We know that because just in general, apart from the war context, They're Ministry of State Security agents who are trying to influence and groom young American politicians. We know that they monitor Chinese students wherever they are on campuses. They're Ministry of State Security agents doing that. So they're already very active here. And the thing, Frank, is that this is not a secret. We know what they're doing, and we allow it to continue. So this is an issue not only about what the Chinese are doing, but it's more an issue about what we're allowing them to do. We have not broken up these networks, and we need to do that. One more point, Frank, and that is we found that biological weapons lab in Reedley, California, that alert building inspector, and she stumbled upon a facility which had at least 20 pathogens, according to the official count, some for deadly diseases, and also almost 1,000 mice that have been genetically engineered to spread disease. That's a real warning about what the Chinese are doing on our soil. So this is a question of American obliviousness and American just disregard for an obvious danger.
We're going to turn next to a man who is another great resource for the work we do at our Institute for the American Future, which he is a senior fellow, I believe. We have also got the benefit of his expertise on any number of these programs. His name is John Guandolo. He is a graduate of the Naval Academy and a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance Unit in combat. He has been as well a special agent of the FBI with responsibility for counterterrorism. These days at johnguandolo.com, you can find him as a resource on many of the problems that we're talking about right now. He has been assiduously raising the alarm about these coming dangers, notably from the Chinese communists and its allies and assets, the jihadists, both foreign and domestic, and the rising probability that they will engage in violence in this country, as we've been talking about at this juncture. And it's a perfect segue, really, John, from Gordon, to talk a bit about the failure of our government, our Homeland Security, our military and intelligence, not least the FBI, to perceive properly and respond accordingly to these enemies that now seem increasingly poised to precipitate violence on a very large scale, perhaps Civil War 2.0. Thank you for joining us, my friend. The floor is yours.
Thanks for having me. And I would echo quite a bit of what was said. So instead of regurgitating it, I'll put it into this perspective. I think concerns that we might get drawn into war, as those of you that follow my work and read what I've been writing and speaking about, and especially in the last month, we are at war. We've been at war for quite a long time. I frame the war between the Islamic movement, the communist movement, and those financing and collaborating with them because while there are other entities out there engaged in this war, like the United Nations, World Economic Forum, the secular humanist movement, the Satanist movement, and all kinds of other entities out there, where the rubber meets the road in the United States, at Anywhere USA, it is the communists and jihadis working together. And as was articulated, as Trevor kind of articulated, these groups are working together hand in hand at the local level. And we have massive amounts of evidence of that I'm not going to run through, but Trevor named some of those groups. And in fact, as I've put out recently, many of the communist and jihadi groups and groups that they've created together are this month having meetings, strategic meetings, to decide how and when to go kinetic at a mass scale in the United States. So these are not, we're not having a discussion about hypothetically, could they go kinetic? Their doctrine and their strategy calls for them to go kinetic when the situation is right. And we know right now they're discussing that. We know right now in the Islamic movement in the United States, Muslim Brotherhood leadership is having quite cantankerous debates with the Muslim community who wants to go kinetic, who wants to raise the black flag over the mosques and start killing people. I mean, this is where we are. And the fact that the what is being called political violence has ramped up in the last year to 15 months is evidence of that. And the fact that these are not, I just said, and I'll say again, that these are elements of the communist movement. These are communist movement operations. The killing of Charlie Kirk, I mean, they're actually making it pretty easy. The LGBTQ movement is a communist line of, it's actually several communist lines of operation in the United States. And you've got this shooter living with a trans who's homosexual, who's a member of DSA, which is a communist group. I mean, they're laying it out for us who they are and what they're doing. And of course, the people in charge of our intelligence and law enforcement organizations scratch their head and are wondering, gee, we can't imagine why he would do this. Gordon just used the phrase or the word oblivious. I can't call it that anymore. The National Democrat leadership is the leading edge, in my estimation, of the U.S. communist movement. They're not just members of, they are the leading edge. And so these people like Gavin Newsom, like Pelosi, like Joe Biden, like Obama, like John Podesta, like John Brennan, and all these people. I mean, James Comey admitted he was a communist, and he was the director of the FBI, for God's sakes. And there's nowhere in the federal government and nowhere at the state level is anyone doing anything. So the two things I would leave with this audience are, we are already at war. They brought the war to us. The Islamic and communist movements are at war with the United States, and they're waging it. And so far, there's been no strategy. Mr. Trump's administration is polluted with terrorists and jihadis, and that I see no movement away from that. Now, I'm praying that the assassination of Charlie Kirk will wake Mr. Trump up to realize that he's got those people inside of his administration, but I'm not holding my breath. I see no governor in the United States that's identifying the enemy and taking actions against it. So I think this war is going to go kinetic here in the United States at levels we have not seen. This is not a civil war, because a civil war is a war between our own people. But these people are not our own people. These are acting members of the communist movement, which are being controlled and guided by external hostile foreign forces. So you have China, Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, UAE, waging a war against the United States using these proxy networks that are made up by thousands of organizations here, both communist, jihadi, and otherwise. And when we fight, because it's going to come down to the citizens, because clearly the governors don't want to fix it, because there's no lack of information, no lack of evidence. The federal government clearly isn't fixing it. While they're fixing issues and they're fixing policies, they're not actually identifying the enemy and vanquishing them, which is how wars are won. So it's going to be left to the citizens. But the war against these people is a war against communists and jihadis. So just because some of them bear the term American citizen, these people are acting as proxies for hostile foreign forces. So I don't consider this a civil war, even though some of these people are American citizens. And it's going to come to that. And we've let it come to that, because through Republican and Democrat administrations, nobody has brought the hammer down on these networks. And again, that's why the work I do is solely focused on training communities, how to identify them and flush them out of the community. And it's going to get to the point in the very near future where it's no longer going to be non-kinetic means. That's just the way it is. And it's because the FBI and DHS and 6 administrations have completely failed to deal with it. And it's left to the American people.
Don, thank you. We're going to want to explore all of that on the other side of one final presentation by our friend George Racely, who I know has a hard stop at the top of the hour. So, George, we're going to ask you to give us your best thoughts, and then we'll turn to Q&A for those that remain. George is another of our colleagues in the Committee on the Present Danger China. He has been extraordinarily impactful in his role as the managing editor of Conservative HQ, Richard Vigory's online newsletter, great resource. He's served in both the congressional and executive branch levels in senior positions. He has been active in 300 political campaigns and has his finger on the pulse of the American people, I think it's fair to say, as well as the political expression of their sentiments. George, thank you so much for joining us. We've asked you to sort of be the cleanup batter here to give us some thoughts about where we are at the moment, yes, but also where we go from here.
Thank you, Frank. And I think that it's crucial for, if we're going to sort of clean up or wrap up what's been said here, is to ask and answer the question, how did we get here? And John and others have alluded to this, but I want to put a finer point on it. We got here because politicians have allowed this to happen. Why? Well, because of what's known as elite capture. And the Chinese, or I prefer to refer to them as the Red Chinese, because communist China is a revolutionary society, and we should not forget that, have perfected this. I mean, it is an art form for them. We saw that with the Bidens, where they pumped something, some estimates are more than $30 million into the Biden family. Joe Biden facilitated a great deal of what's been discussed and warned about in this program. And we can say with complete authority that there would not be 100,000 Chinese military personnel in this country without Joe Biden and without the elite capture program of the Chinese Communist Party. I want to put one other point out there. This is not just only at the presidential level. Gordon mentioned Act Blue. Act Blue is a money laundering operation. It's laundered billions of what would otherwise be illegal campaign contributions for far left candidates, right down to, I believe probably the city council. Certainly it has funneled money into politicians in our larger urban areas, those that are possible nexus for kinetic action, if you will. They are the hubs of many of these intersectionality type of organizations between jihadis and communists. And so, if things kick off, and I don't disagree with those who think that such a destructive environment is before us, it's going to be at these large Democrat-run cities where all the Act Blue money has been funneled. And it is, as I said, billions of dollars. So what we have is a enemy that's committed to, we often call it unrestricted warfare, but it's more accurately all domain warfare, in which every endeavor of human activity is a field of action for the Chinese Communist Party. And we see that especially in college campuses. And so while we fear a repeat of the chemical and biological warfare that was committed against us during the COVID-19 epidemic, there's another epidemic, another virus that's infecting our country, and that is their penetration of our colleges and universities. And again, a ripe field for recruitment and for kinetic action. So I would just want to leave everybody with the understanding that this is not something that could not have been stopped. It was not stopped because the elite decision makers, especially in the Democrat Party, have been captured by our enemies through various means, some direct, what amounts to bribery or legalized bribery, if you will, in the case of the Bidens, but also in a case of legalized bribery through campaign contributions flowing through to individuals who are sympathetic to communist China and our other enemies. And those contributions have been laundered through Act Blue to the tune of billions of dollars.
As a serious student of and commentator on the politics of all of this, the murder of Charlie Kirk has clearly upped the level of concern, not least, I guess, about the physical safety of individuals in leadership roles, to the extent that they are, not in every case, obviously, but in a number of them, and Trevor has done a marvelous job of documenting this, among the captured elites. Is there any indication, aside possibly from Donald Trump, who is now talking at least about bringing racketeering charges, criminal investigation at a minimum, of George Soros and his son Alex, who, by the way, is married to Huma Abedin. So it's another example of this red-green alliance operating. Do you see there being leadership coming out of the president on this, in that respect at least, and might that have some bearing on bringing along others in political life? The indictment of the Democrats is pretty sweeping here, but how about the Republicans?
I wish that I could say with complete assurance that that was going to happen, Frank, but to be perfectly honest with you, the Act Blue money laundering operation and the strong suspicion that a lot of that money has come from Red China has been known. And it was discussed in the early days of the new Trump administration, and suddenly it fell off the radar screen. Now, I would hope that the awful, awful murder of Charlie Kirk, who is a good friend to some of us on this program, would prompt a stronger look at where the money came from and the organizations that promoted the ideologies that convinced the people that were involved, and I believe it is more than one, that killing Charlie was a appropriate political act. But I don't have any evidence that they're actually pursuing that at the level that it should be pursued. And I find it very interesting that on the Democrat side, many of the big beneficiaries of these billions of dollars of Act Blue money have been quite silent on Charlie's murder, or even have, in their own way, attempted to justify it. So, this is elite capture working at a very high level to make sure that the signal is going out, as others have suggested, that violence is okay.
Thank you, George. And if you have to scoot, we really appreciate your participation in this program. There have been polls that have been recently issued, as I'm sure you're aware, indicating that, as George just said, there's a sizable number of people, mostly in the Democratic Party, I guess, but some in the Republican, who are now of the view that political violence is at least sometimes justified, and some have gone so far as to say that it would be justified to eliminate Donald Trump. How does that popular sentiment fit into your analysis and where you think we are at the moment?
Well, see, we all used to watch Hogan's Heroes back in the day, right? Where the Americans and the French, they were interned in a German prison camp, and they would kill the Nazis and sabotage the Nazis and steal from the Nazis. And we all laughed. We thought it was great, and good on them for taking down the Nazis. Well, when half of America is now classified as Nazi, and you're a hardcore leftist on the campus, it is your duty to lie and steal and cheat and even kill the Nazis. That is the culture. That's the culture out there. Now, that's why the young man killed that health executive up in New York. That's why that lovely young couple were murdered outside the Israeli embassy, because they're Nazis. And it is right and moral, and it is your obligation to kill them. So we're getting all this pumped into these radical young leftists that we're Nazis, and by any means necessary is not just permitted, but is your duty. Until we address that, and then we've got the Chinese and the Russians and everything pumping these memes onto the internet. I think, a lot of conservatives are really riled up because a lot of leftists are coming out and saying, ha ha, Charlie, he got what he deserved. We need more. I think some of those are genuine, but a lot of those are memes pumped in by our enemies to just make it all worse.
Yeah.
So I think they work both sides to just pump up the tensions to the absolute maximum.
John, you've been studying some of these foreign elements at work. I don't know that you mentioned, but I'd be interested in particular in your assessment of the role that the Qataris are playing in this pumping up, and on college campuses, obviously, among other places as well.
Yeah, we've seen money from Qatar in a number of college campuses running information operations. And in Texas, shockingly, even at Texas A&M University, part of which was shut down, but part of which is continuing. And in my home state of Texas, a lot of big talk, but no action coming from the leadership as usual here. I mean, when I meet with Texans and brief local leaders, they're realizing that the governor and the leadership at the state level, it's not that they're not only doing nothing, they're saying they're doing something when they're not. And this is you've got across the United States, if we just look at the jihadi side, you've got networks that are supporting violent jihadi operations from 9/11 forward. They're enforcing Sharia on the ground. They are continuing to grow their networks at exponential rates. And state officials, you're not going to get anything out of the federal government. They've demonstrated they're criminally negligent. But it's amazing to watch these networks grow. And the leaders say, we're not going to tolerate this here. They're not going to be able to do anything. And just you're looking at it grow and you're saying, what are you talking about? They're kicking your ass right now and you're doing nothing. And you're just flexing your muscle and talking a big game. I mean, the governor of Texas is horrid. It's horrible, the level of incompetence and criminal negligence here. But this is what we've seen from DHS, from the FBI, during Republican and Democratic administrations.
Despite your best efforts, John, I think both inside the FBI and in terms of your training programs aimed at trying to equip law enforcement and intelligence and other personnel of the government, among others, civilians as well, with the kind of ground truth that they need to make informed and responsible decisions. And again, I would just ask you, as you've talked about this coming, violent upheaval. Obviously, we're not inviting it. We're not encouraging it. We're not interested in having citizens take up arms against it. But still, your professional judgment, as I understand it, is you think that's what the other side, the enemies of this country, foreign and domestic, have in mind for us. And at the end of the day, it may just be that it comes down to civilians to resist it. But does that give rise to a civil war in your estimation?
I think we're to the point that I don't see, barring something divine intervening, I don't see it not going kinetic. I don't see how it doesn't. They're planning for it. They're literally this month. I mean, there are meetings going on today where they are planning how and when to go kinetic. And this is both the communist and the Islamic movement. This is everything from DSA and CPUSA and Unity of Fields and the Green Party, all working with CARE and ISNA and ICNA and USCMO and Students for Liberation and Palestine. It's all of them having meetings around the country and coordinating when's the optimal time. And what they would love is they would love for citizens to kick off first so that it can appear as if they're only responding to it. What I'm saying is I don't do that. Part of our training is telling people you've got to restrain yourself, but you have to know who the bad guys are, where they are in your community. So when they kick off, you're going to know what to do, but you got to have a plan. All the things we teach and train in our programs is all it's all lawful response. There are plenty of ways
really
to push individuals and organizations out of your county lawfully.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get people to do. But at a minimum, identify who they are, where they are. So when they kick off, you're going to know what side is what. And that's the key. I don't see any outcome right now where it is not going to be violent, because they're planning it, they're talking about it, and they're leaning into it right now.
Right. So, Jeff, we're going to come to you in just a second, but John, just one last question. You have served as a senior law enforcement professional. If you know that these meetings are taking place, if you know the kinds of groups, and you mentioned a whole alphabet soup of Islamist organizations, basically, jihadi brotherhoods and other front groups, then surely people who are doing the kinds of jobs that you previously did know that those meetings are taking place as well. Is it possible legally for them, not individual citizens, but them, the law enforcement community, intelligence community, or Homeland Security at a minimum, to be acting against these groups before they pull the trigger on going violent?
Absolutely. The problem has never been a lack of information. And we could have shut down, in 2001, most of the Islamic organizations in the United States. The information is there and the evidence is there. We've certainly accumulated a lot more in the last 24 years. Same thing with the communist organizations, the funding channels. There are so many laws. It could be a RICO case. We've said that for years on both sides of this aisle. It's a lack of leadership, and it's, quite frankly, I think, while I agree that some of the response and some of the online presence we're seeing in response to Charlie Kirk's assassination are coming from hostile information operations, I do not disagree with that at all. I also believe that what we're seeing in the military, in law enforcement, in the healthcare industry, among teachers of junior high schools, and colleges, America is getting a dose that the communist movement and people who ideologically align themselves with the communist movement, who also just happen to all be Democrats. If you look at Trevor's, and we use Trevor's material when we train, and he's aware of this. When you look at the now we probably over 70 members of the House of Representatives that are openly communist, and they openly affiliate and support communism. Number one, zero FBI investigations into that, number one. Number two, they're all Democrats, which goes to the point. It's the Democrat Party that is the leading edge, the leadership of the Democrat Party of the U.S. communist movement. Mm-hmm. And so with all this going on, yes, you could have significant RICO investigations at the federal level, and in some states like Texas, where it's a state felony to conspire to overthrow the state government, you could do the same thing at the state level. It's never been a lack of evidence. It's a lack of courage, and it's a lack of leadership. And what's interesting to me is in the last month, many, many more sheriffs, police chiefs, constables have approached me and my organization for training, because they realize the state government is failing and the federal government has been failing for a long time. Yeah. And people are starting to realize that there's the ability. So I'll just say this. If you waved a wand and today I was the director of the FBI, for instance, there would be no less than 10 national level investigations, RICO investigations, and you could bring it to prosecution very quickly. But then you've got to battle DOJ that is rife with these same kinds of people that are supportive and quite frankly, many of them members of the communist and Islamic movements.
Right. Let me come to you, Jeff. And I guess I'm going to ask this question of each of you. If you can be succinct, please. What should we be doing now, Jeff, in light of what you've shared and what our other colleagues have about the distinct prospects of violent action being taken, either, again, at the behest of, certainly being enabled by, and to the benefit of enemies, both foreign and domestic, of this country?
The first thing I would say is we have to be aware of the communist strategy of provocation. Much of what they do, and this whole scissors strategy and the dialectic, is based on provocation. That is, entering the enemy's camp, provoking their enemy into doing something stupid that will then activate their people. Just like with the George Floyd riots is a good example of provocation. It doesn't even matter if you've provoked the other side to actually doing something wrong, as long as you can make it appear so. So we have to be extremely careful. And, when you've got the active measures have been so successful in preparing this, 55% of Democrats in a recent poll said that it would be okay if Trump was assassinated. You have, in the extreme violence of the communists, you look at the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, that last summer, a year ago, this past July, they had these memes about ice picks. And Ramon Mercader, the assassin of Trotsky, saying there should be a statue made of him, right? He got the Order of Lenin from Khrushchev, but he was Stalin's assassin of Trotsky. So they were actually using this to intimidate other people on the left to fall into line, and broadcasting this all over the internet openly. And these are leaders of the DSA, not just rank and file, to show you how violent this group is. But they are trained and they understand provocation. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Trans Antifa. So we have to be very careful. And with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we have to be very careful that this assassin was part of a wider group, and that the operative word is provocation.
I'm sorry, could you just say that again? Because I want to make sure I was clear about it, as well as our audience. You're saying that you are asserting that this individual who is alleged to have pulled the trigger is part of a larger group, and that larger group is bent on provoking a response by this murder?
There is evidence appearing online of other people, other leftists, being aware that this assassination was going to happen. This is starting to appear. And I think we're going to find that there were people saying there's going to be something done against Charlie Kirk. They knew there was intimation. So I think that the government should not be naive. He was part of a network. These people don't exist in isolation. He wasn't in isolation. He wasn't hermetically sealed.
Thank you. Trevor, you have talked on this program in the past and may wish to do so again in this context about what might be done to use counter-mafia techniques to try to disrupt these kinds of operations. Is that what you would once again recommend in this context?
That's one of the things. And I'd just like to add one little thing I forgot to say. If you want a good example of the Russian propaganda currently operating in America, look for all the memes that say Israel was behind killing Charlie Kirk. They're circulating all over the place amongst the sort of fake right. Israel, it was all Mossad, it was all Israel. Well, that's clearly to divide us from Israel and get the conservative movement against Israel. That is coming from all the Russian websites. That's one example right there. If you believe that, you're a Russian Duke. I'll say too, so I think the problem, and I'll go right to leadership here. If President Trump had a better understanding of ideology, or he had people around him who are willing to tell him the right things instead of people like Tulsi Gabbard, who's shilled for our enemies her entire political career, he would understand that there is an ideological war going on. He stopped Israel finishing off the mullahs. He wants to do deals with Russia. He wants to do deals with China. He wants to do deals with Qatar. All of these countries have people are working to destroy this country. But he doesn't seem to understand the ideologies there. So if we can get that through to him, if the Senate and the Congress can grow up here and stand up and say, we got to do something about this, we'll get action. But what Frank alluded to was this. I think John is 100% right. Look, 10 RICO lawsuits would shut this down. I could have given the FBI the names of 100 people when the George Floyd riots were going on, and they could have gone to those people and shut the whole thing down. Easy. It would have been gone. So these are small numbers of people running this. So I think, ultimately I'd be getting Kash Patel to set up a new unit in the FBI, the best, the brightest, and the bravest. And it would be totally focused on foreign infiltration from Muslim Brotherhood, Russians, Chinese, whoever it was. And then first thing you do, you declare a 3-month amnesty. Every foreign hostile actor in this country has got 3 months to leave the country. If you haven't left in 3 months, you're going to jail. That's it. You're out of here. If we can catch you for something, you're going to jail. All domestic traitors, you got to apply organized crime tactics. You got 3 months to come forward to the FBI, spill your guts, tell us everything you know, who you paid, who paid you, what you stole, what you influenced, what you did. If you do that, you will get amnesty from prosecution. But you have to testify in court against all of your co-conspirators. And if you do that, you get a free pass. You go and stack shelves in some obscure city for the rest of your life, but you don't go to jail. If at the end of 3 months you haven't come forward and we catch you, you're going to live in Worth for the rest of your natural life. No parole, no nothing. You would get a massive outflux of Chinese and Iranians and Russian mobsters leaving the country never to return, Mexican cartel, etc. And the ones who are here would fall over themselves ratting on each other. It would completely melt down every foreign operation in the country because the care guy who was paying off a senator or dealing with a senator wouldn't know if the senator had taken a deal and was wearing a wire, and the senator wouldn't know if the care guy was wearing a wire. Or the Iranian or the Chinese or whatever. So we have to have RICO lawsuits, 100%, just like you deal with the mafia. You have to have an amnesty program for certain people who could get out of the net, and you have to have a self-deportation of hundreds of thousands of these people and a very vigorous prosecutions of who remains. If you do that, then put in real FARA laws, real prosecutions, real teeth, we could do massive damage to our enemies without firing a shot and set them back decades. And I think it's just a matter of using the same techniques you'd go after the mafia, use them on the Muslim Brotherhood, the Chinese Communist Party, the Duganites, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, the North Koreans, all the people who are now who basically have infiltrated our government.
Trevor, thank you. John Guandolo, last to you. What do we do now? And is there time?
Trevor just kind of nailed it. If the president had an epiphany that he needed something done, I think you build a mission-focused, tight organization whose singular goal is to destroy the communist and Islamic movements in the United States, and domestic and international entities, individuals or otherwise, funding and lending support to them. I think
but John, is the reason I asked about the question of time is the focus of effort that really needs to be made at this juncture disrupting rather than destroying? I mean, the destroying goal is obviously needed, but is that something we don't have time for? At the best, we can disrupt their kinetic operations before they start.
It would be nice to do that. And again, the reason I focus my efforts working with primarily citizens, but also with local officials and local law enforcement when they are interested, is because that's where the rubber meets the road. And they are able definitely to disrupt operations in their county. We've actually done that with some very significant successes. So the into action training that we do trains counties to do that. And obviously I encourage that, as soon as possible. And I'm also putting something together to push out so that even people that can't or haven't been able to get trained or the time, they'll at least have a working manual of how to actually do that. How do you locate them? And quite frankly, it's not hard. The jihadis, quite frankly, want to be found because they're advertising who they are. The communists now are much more out in the open. Everybody's out in the open now. They're not ashamed of who they are and what they're doing. It's a matter of communities getting together and actually shutting down their ability to operate. I still would say if today at the national level, the leaders decide to pull their heads out of their asses and actually address the enemy, it would be very nice and very helpful. So far, I haven't seen that.
Well, our prayerful hope is that with the martyring of Charlie Kirk and the focused attention that it is generating, and hopefully that this webinar and others like it that have preceded it will inform our leadership to engage in that kind of corrective action, as each of you has made clear is vitally needed, and the hour is very, very late indeed. I want to thank Gordon Chang, Trevor Loudon, Jeff Nyquist, John Guandolo, and George Racely for an extraordinarily important conversation. Needless to say, I think we all pray that we'll be wrong about this. I fear that, especially given the extraordinary track record of and acumen and experiences of our guests, that there's cause for being very, very concerned that we're right, and the need for action at the community level at a minimum, and ultimately, hopefully, at the leadership level, could not be more urgently needed. We'll be watching with great care and interest and concern what happens in the next week, the run-up to Charlie Kirk's funeral in Arizona on Sunday in an open-air stadium. I've got to tell you, I've got some real concerns about that in light of what we've all been just talking about. We pray for the peace of our country and its survival against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We encourage you to do the same. Thank you for bearing with us on some technical difficulties early on, and for this wonderful panel and the expert assessments that have been provided. Please share them and then go forth and multiply.